Right. Yeah, so what do you think about the afterlife?
I think there's many perspectives on it. Some people think heaven or hell. Some people think reincarnation. I'm curious to see what it's like, but you gotta wait a lot of years to go there. But I mean, either it could be just nothingness, but I think reincarnation is plausible, but it's just hard to confirm anything.
So, reincarnation, what led you there? Like, how'd you get that? Like, as maybe like a preference, it sounds like, but
Yeah, my friends would always talk about it. It seems to be what they believe, so it's just kind of thought to be my thing. Like, because heaven or hell seems very straightforward, and reincarnation just no, it's not like remembering or anything or like a soul or anything, but just like I'm not really sure.
yeah, just kind of like that idea of like maybe energy can't be destroyed.
Yeah.
Is that like where you're
Yeah,
getting
it
at, or?
cannot be destroyed and it cannot be created, so it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, yeah,
That.
for sure. And so, in terms of like, well, what you're believing now, that's kind of like maybe a hopeful. It sounds like hopeful, but right before I just stopped you from whatever you're listening to, I just asked like, are you an atheist? And like, and you said, yeah. I mean, agnostic, really, kind of like you don't know for sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think everyone would agree that like no one would necessarily like no.
Yeah.
And that's really common, and like everyone I speak to on the streets, and especially in Central Oregon, it's a little different if you go to places like Utah where you run into like a lot of Mormons and everything like that, but just depending on different worldviews. But so as an atheist, like, what do you think started everything? Like, since the universe had a beginning, at least most people agree about that.
Yeah. Like the Big Bang, that theory going around, like there's evidence, but not really. Like I don't know how everything started, but like something had to have started because things are still expanding and whatnot, the universe and whatnot. We had to be created at some point. Like I think that you know matter, the theory of Big Bang, all the matter was in one spot and then exploded. But like I'm thinking, like people are talking about like, oh, the universe keeps expanding and expanding. At some point, it's gonna like tear,
Sure.
and maybe all the tearing is like maybe everything gets sucked into something and turns it back into like the Big Bang again. Maybe restarts, something like that.
Yeah. So, like, is the universe eternal in your perspective? Like, something's always been, like, or was there an actual start? Like, nothing created everything.
That's hard to talk about. Like there had to be something forever. Like it can't just start from nothing. Like it's hard to think about that there was nothingness at some point. People say, what is it, 13 billion years ago? That was one.
Like that. Yeah, I think they just came, keep tacking on the billions every once in a while. But yeah.
Some random high number.
Yeah, yeah.
But like the theory of God creating everything, like that's more plausible than just nothingness. But then again, like some higher being, it's just hard to think about. But like everything started from nothing, so a god either could do it, or like the universe like restarting over and over again or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So that'd be kind of matching the reincarnation, but like, so in terms of reincarnation, do you believe that like morality plays a role in what you come back as, if that's true?
Like probably think about like whatever you are, you come back as. Like I'm not gonna come back as like a frog or something. I'll probably just come back as another human.
Okay.
If they're still around for billions of years.
Yeah. Yeah. What would so humans come back as humans, frogs come back as frogs, like.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you wouldn't say like this tree was once a man.
No, okay, so I think plants are a bit different than, us because they don't have like a brain. We are running on like hunting and whatnot. We gotta eat and whatnot. Trees are more like, I think plants and other organisms are different. Like animals and trees, different like categories, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So, like I'm a Christian, so I mean that's why I like having these conversations. I think these conversations are a little taboo, and most people don't want to have them. But I love when I can find a few people at least just to talk about it. But yeah, so like from a Christian perspective, that makes sense, right? Like there was a God, created everything after its own kind. There's a difference between humanity and say like the plants, birds, bees, animals, and that difference. Well, you can kind of see it in like that we have like a conscience, like we're setting up justice systems. That would be one example. Like I don't see maybe necessarily an example of like a court system, pretty predominant. But even in like the most like third world countries, you have some basis of morality. Like right, even in cannibalistic societies, you can't eat the chief is most likely one of the big rules. Is kind of even like in those we would call that immoral. Most people would, but like there's still rules and boundaries and morality. So as like a professed atheist, but you know, open sounds like more so, what basis do you have for like grounding your morality? Like when you say something right, something wrong, is that just your opinion, or is that like, is there something outside of you that says that's right and wrong? Like murder is always wrong, like an unjust taking of a life. Like, is there something that outside of yourself, or do you believe that's just up to you?
So yeah, I'm pretty open-minded about it. Like, for example, yeah, murder, right? I think that's pretty like immoral. Like, but if it's deserving, things like, I don't know, think of it eye for an eye, in like, let's say one of those tribal like cannibalistic tribes and whatnot.
Yeah.
You murder someone, you probably get whatever they have the death sentence as, but not as like complicated and more laws that we do. But like my morals probably mostly come from around me, because you know I think of everyone else's feelings and emotions. Everything takes part of what I do, so I base off of everyone else and what they do, and just
Can like everyone else be wrong?
no one has a right or wrong opinion. Like, murder is wrong or right, can't be one of them. It's based on what you think, and well, the majority would say no, and the majority would think the minority is wrong and probably crazy.
But none of them is necessarily right or wrong in your opinion.
Opinions can never be right nor wrong, but things that can be like as a fact, those will never play into morality. Like, humans will never fly on our own.
Yeah, it wouldn't be immoral. I mean, we break the law of physics. I mean, kind of break it in terms of we break the law of gravity,
Yeah.
in terms of like planes and all that,
Yeah.
using natural means, everything that we have available to us in this earth. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. And like, if you took it a step further, like, you know, I can't help but like, and this is an extreme example, I'll admit that, but like the pedophile would love your answer, right? Like, man, no right, no wrong necessarily, but like how do you go up to someone like that, which is egregious? Like, that's wicked in my opinion. I like bring that up saying that I want to let you know that I think that's wicked. But like, what is the moral complaint in a world that is indifferent, really, in like, not in terms of just like people in general? I would say that it's like conscience, but like it's begging the question, like why is the pedophile wrong ultimately, like completely wrong?
Well, okay, so imagine back in like prehistoric times, where people were, you know, not as sophisticated as we are now, like, I don't know, caveman times. People didn't have like a set like age. We didn't know what years were, so people would do anything they want with whoever they want. So there was no like pedophile kind of things back then, like, because morality was different. But now, like, that definitely plays into like emotions and feelings. Like, most children would not want to be with adults, and that plays into their feelings and emotions. They don't want that, so there's a law against it because it's immoral, because people do not want it.
But there's some people that do, right? So like, let's say it's just you and that guy. Like, well, who cares? Who are you to say? Like that. You see where it kind of like would break down potentially. I mean, and even societally, right? Like Nazi Germany is always the example everyone goes to, but it's true. You have a whole society embracing a lot of the ideologies. Granted, a lot of people didn't know it to what extent, but as Hitler was embraced, even as a society, like societies can be wrong as a whole. The majority can't determine what's right and wrong, right? Like we may write laws that say, like, even America, take America, like slavery was legal for a time. No one today would say like, yeah, I wish it was, if it's the majority opinion, sure, let's enslave some people. Like that's still wrong. Unless, what do you think? If we're back in, slavery days, is it wrong?
Yeah, I think it's still wrong because, like, yes, we have to think about majority opinion, but there's an extent to where we still have to think about the feelings, emotions, and the overall just life of the minority. If the 2 people out of 10 are unhappy with something, we don't just brush them aside. We still have to think about their feelings and whatnot. But that doesn't make things like murder, pedophilia, things like that okay, because that still makes the majority in danger and unhappy.
Sure. So I mean, most society embraces it. It's legalized. It's an accepted practice for eons in like a lot of different cultures. But you said, like, think about the minorities. Think about the the oppression. There's still oppression. Think about the emotions, the feelings. Well, like, I can resonate with that. Like, I would say, because I'm a Christian, I have a basis outside of myself that actually there's a natural law built within us. Like, we know right and wrong. Like what I was saying, like we can distinguish, like, but what's different about you and I from the animals, I would say. However, from like an atheistic or like an agnostic worldview, like here's how you're viewing everything, right? Like, where is, like, by what standard, like, emotions, feelings, like, who cares in the end, right? Like, by what standard are you appealing to? Like, you say I should care about emotions and feelings, but why?
I think you should care because you, as a person, are no less from any other at birth. Now, in the end, that changes because that's based on what you do. Like, a horrible person, like murderer, is, I would say, much less of a person than someone who would always, like, donate, charity, just very nice person. And so, I think it's like a moral thing to be nice to people, so you don't end out as the lesser person. You have to be the bigger person in the end.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I agree with you. I'm just trying to point you to your worldview, though. Like, right, like, if we're all just nerves, biological stuff, like, I think, like, what, like Star Trek said, like, we're bags of mostly water. Like, who cares? Like, ultimately, in the end of time, who cares about that, right? Like, in that worldview. Now, like, I think, and this is my perspective, I think we talk like Christians. Like, we talk like there's a God. We talk like there's an objective reality around us. Like, there's something outside of ourselves. There's something begging that we know it's wrong, but we can't. I think, in the rejection of God, a God, in this kind of conversation, we abandon any right to say anything to our neighbor, to say that is wrong, because ultimately we're talking about nerve endings. We're talking about things like might makes right. The survival of the fittest mentality. You're reduced to absurdity in terms of morality. There's no actual basis except I think so, right? But I disagree with that. Like, I disagree, because I do think we're made in the image of God, meaning we reflect Him. We're not God's ourselves. We reflect Him in some of His attributes, meaning like love, logic, like reason, and like basically all how we carry out our life. Like, even a justification, I brought up morality, but logic, reason, morality, like, what is a logic? It's an immaterial thing that everyone seems is universal. law of non-contradiction. Like, even having a basis for those things, like why, or induction. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but like induction meaning that the past will be like the future. All scientific endeavors rely upon these truths, but there's no philosophical basis for why that's true. We just say it seems to be true, but in reality, without a grounding for us as people, there's no reason you should believe any of that. And that's why I said, you're like, to me, you sound like a Christian. You sound like you're borrowing things from my worldview, that there's inherent at birth worth in you. Like, there's inherent worth in you that no one can scrub away, no one can enslave, that there's something transcendent, meaning that it goes beyond what I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have like just an open mind about things. Maybe I just pick things apart from things and just think what I want to think. Yeah. Like, to me, I don't believe in a God, like an upper being, or someone who we reflect upon, or someone who watches upon us, or anything like that. But I do believe that, yeah, at birth we are all the same. We are none beneath each other, none above, and that'll remain the same if we don't do anything. But being nice and, just being a good person to everyone, then...
But like, good by what standard?
The standard of what's good for the majority and the minority. Like, you don't want to oppress anyone, and you want to generally care about everyone, because emotions and feelings, they do take a part in, our physical body. Like, someone who is depressed, sad, going through rough times are physically, at a worse state than people who are positive and, doing great. So I think, being caring and just respect, things like that to everyone is just, it matters, because like the thing you said about us reflecting and being born with something from God, I think God is, now I don't believe in him, but I do have a Christian family, and I think he is just like the entirety of everything we know and will ever know, and we are just learning all of it as we go. And some people are just made of different aspects of him, like you said, of the logic, the love, hate, things like that.
Yeah, like justice, right?
Yeah.
Like meaningful, like, and then what I'm pressing is, like, if I disagree with you, who cares? In your worldview, right? Like, well, if I disagree with you, what would you say to that? Like, if I just said, nope, I disagree.
That's what you think.
You see, and that's what leads us to anarchy. Ultimately, if you brought it to its logical end, I don't believe that we get there, because you're talking, like I said, like a Christian. And since you said you have a Christian family, I'm sure you were brought up with like some ideals, some morality, some ideas of right and wrong, charity even being a good thing, rather than letting them starve and die. Yeah. And a lot of people would disagree with you in history, right? Like, communist regimes would allow those people to starve, die. Millions, atheistic at their core. And, you got Mao, Pol Pot's, it just goes on and on and on. And of course, there's moral atrocities from all people, because people, I think something is just bent in us, right? Like, but we're not always good. Like, I don't know, like, would you consider yourself to ultimately, like, at the end, like, be a good person?
I think I'm a pretty good person. I try my best to make everyone else around me just happy, and I care for everyone. I try to put everyone else first before me. I know that's like probably a depressing point of view.
No, I agree with it.
Yeah, I just, because if I can help more people, then those more people will help more people, and just overall everyone will be better. See, okay, my friend's mom, she was a really nice lady, and her name was Charity. How convenient, because she was the nicest person ever, and she worked at a place who, not exactly sure what it was called, but she would help people get jobs, and she would do fundraisers and a lot of things like that. And she was spreading love all around town and making everyone's lives better. And that's kind of what I want to do. I want to make everyone better than they were before meeting me.
Yeah, so like good person ultimately, and then like as a Christian, like biblically speaking, like I mean, run it through. Are you familiar with like the Ten Commandments?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, and like how are you doing with those?
Now, I can't name all of them off the top of my head, but I know, respecting elders, parents, being nice to everyone. Just, I think the Ten Commandments, don't know all of them, of course, but I remember reading them in my friend's house and whatnot, because they're Christian too. And they're good morals to go by, and it wouldn't hurt if more people started going by those commandments. But now they're just, in the end, they are only rules that people can only choose to follow.
Sure. And I would say, from my perspective, no one does. No one does. I mean, like we may try, but no one actually follows it, right? Like don't lie. How many lies have you told in life?
Probably more than I can count on my fingers, but
me too.
not a lot that I can remember either.
Yeah, and then like, don't commit adultery. Like, I don't know if you're married or a girlfriend or anything like that, but like ever cheat on a girlfriend or anything like that?
Never.
Yeah, well, and then like if you take Jesus, for example, at his word, and he talks about the Ten Commandments a little bit in the Gospels, and he just said, hey, it's not about the letter of the law, it's about following with your heart. If you look at a woman and lust after her, you've committed adultery in your heart. Have you ever looked at a woman with lust?
I have. And
yeah, me too.
Of course, everyone does. It's a feeling no one can control.
And then he also said if you hate your brother, you're guilty of murder. That's because it's like the beginnings of where that goes. Now, we may not carry it out, but like if you hate your brother, that's murder. Ever hated anyone?
I don't think I've ever actually hated someone enough that I would actually want to murder them. But there's definitely people I do not want to be around, but doesn't mean I do not want them to die. They should still live their own life and be with their families and be happy. It's not like I wish them a horrible life. Now, some people, like, for example, Adolf Hitler, like, he's like the extreme.
Right.
Now, straight out, he shouldn't have done any of that, of course.
Yeah, 6 million Jews.
Yeah, that's horrible. But he can't go back on that, and I think things like that can not be forgiven. But people just like, if you hate someone like, oh, he's annoying or he's just not very nice to me, doesn't mean that's can't be forgiven. Like, you can forgive but never forget.
Yeah, and so I mean that, like I don't know. That's a tough one, right? Like hatred. Like how do you measure that? Like dislike, displeasure. But it's like basically like an utter disgust that they're even a person. So yeah, that's awesome. And then like one that like biblically speaking, like this is like have no other gods before me, meaning like not setting yourself up as God or anything else, but honoring God as God, right? Like if he gave you, like I'll just use the if since you're saying you don't believe, but if he gave you life, basically that would necessitate gratitude. Meaning like when you look at a sunset and you're like, man, I'm so grateful for that. Well, to what? Like, oh, just plasma bouncing around and hitting my retinas in a way that I think is artificially beautiful or what? Like, and so if there is a God, like, have you always honored him as God? And like everyone's fallen short of that, right? Like, and even as you said, like you're an atheist, that would necessitate, oh man, well I'm not there, right? Agreed? Yeah, and so even if you were to take those few, right, like that's not even 10, but, and you said it was like good moral standards, like honor your parents, don't commit adultery, don't murder. Like those are good commandments, but we've all broken at least something. And so, at least from like a Christian's perspective, like if there is transcendent morality, there must be justice. Meaning if there is anything called good or evil, there has to be something that like gives us a North Star to say, that way is north. I don't just think, you know, when I'm out, if I'm floating in the middle of the ocean, lost on a raft, I don't think to myself, I'm just going to pick my own truth. I'm going to look for the North Star and say, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go that way. So that's what objectivity, that's what transcendentalism is. Like, something transcends you. The truth is outside of yourself. And if there is a God, and if he cares about justice, right? Like, he cares about people, and he hates what Adolf Hitler did. No, my mouth's getting dry. If he hated what Adolf Hitler did, you said it was unforgivable. So if there is that aspect, if there is an evil that is so unforgivable, like the murdering, the slaughtering of women, children, and adults at the hands of like an evil man like Adolf Hitler, justice must be served. So if there is a God, I believe if he is good, like Christians say he is, he has to care about justice. But the issue is, a lot of the times we want to say, well, Adolf Hitler's bad, I'm not. But here we are, when God is who he is, we want to put our moral standard against him and say, look at me. When Adolf Hitler probably wouldn't say he's a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
Cleaning the jeans, like just making sure it's all clear, right? We all have our moral standards, but they never measure up, right? Like, everyone I talk to says they're a good person. That's not necessarily true. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think some people, if they say that, most people would say, yeah, they're a good person because they go by what they think is right and what their morals are. Because if they thought something was wrong that they did, and if they did not feel regret, then they would feel, yeah, I'm a good person, because they don't feel anything for that. But if they do regret and, like, you know, forgive but never forget, you can never forget what you have done. But if you forgive and, you know, make right, then I'd say you're still, you know, a good person. But if you keep making those mistakes and those atrocities with the conscience of knowing that that is wrong, then yeah, you are a bad person.
Yeah, and so like, even take it to like the court of law, right? Like, if you're breaking laws, let's move the morality standard to a law, like a courtroom. And if that's the standard you're held to, like, and you tell the judge, you know, I'll stop, you know, I'm going to try to get better, you know, all these things. He's like, as you should. But what you're here for today is what you broke the law, is why you broke the law, right? And so you said you were a Christian. Like, do you know, like, how forgiveness works in Christianity? Like, okay. Or like, I mean, you've probably heard the phrase, like, Jesus died for your sins.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how does that work? Do you know?
So, Jesus died for your sins, yeah.
In a Christian's perspective, yeah.
Right. In a Christian's perspective, Jesus died for your sins. That is, he is granting, you know, forgiveness for your wrongdoings, but that is not granting permission to commit sins and keep on enacting on those things.
Yeah. And so that's like, that's where I'm always interested, because like, fundamentally, like, Christianity is pretty widespread in the United States and in our laws, and even the Ten Commandments used to be on outside of every courthouse or in every courthouse. And so I'm always curious to be like, well, what do you know about that in terms of the Christian perspective? Now, if there is a God and we have a conscience, justice actually matters. It's not just my opinion that you matter, but you actually matter outside of that rock. Like, even though we call it different things, in an atheistic worldview, you're pretty much just as valuable as the tree. And then anything I say, well, you're more valuable because of this. Now you're just describing things to me. You're not telling me why it's worth more. You do things, but you don't photosynthesize. Like, why are you saying that's better or worse than the tree? You know, some environmentalists even say, like, you know, you are less than a tree in some regard. And then, but anyway, beside the point, if there is justice and morality in this world, and it can be accounted for, and our conscience actually attests to it, and conscience meaning simply like with, and then science means knowledge. So that's how you spell it. It's with knowledge. We're with knowledge of what is right and wrong. So simply put, it's like this. If you're in a courtroom and we're guilty of all those things, the Christian perspective is that God will not find you guiltless. And if that's the standard, if that is the standard, everyone's guilty, right?
Yeah.
Nobody, and like everyone says this, I'm good, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And like you would probably say the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so in the courtroom analogy, and I'll just say this in brief, because maybe you've never heard it, but Christianity fundamentally says justice was dealt with, meaning that Jesus did live the life that we couldn't, right? He died a death on that cross that we actually deserved, because the Bible actually says like the wages of sin is death, that we die not arbitrarily, not just ridiculous, but we die because we earned it, and we all do it. But the Christian response is simply like, we're guilty, the judge swings the gavel, you're guilty. However, Jesus comes in and pays the fine. Your case is legally dismissed. Justice is accounted for. If a fine has been paid, you can legally be dismissed from any courtroom, if that is the penalty, right?
Yeah.
And so the penalty for us was death. Jesus died the death, and then in so doing, he gives us his righteousness, and then he takes on ours on the cross. So the Christian perspective is that it's simply a transaction before God. And then if we just stop trusting in ourselves, stop trusting in our reasoning, our own logic, our own morality, and just stop trying to be God in our universe, ultimately defining and determining anything and everything, and saying, I just trust him, like you would trust a parachute or an elevator. Most people haven't skydived, but like an elevator is holding your life. You just move that kind of trust to Christ, and through doing that, you are legally dismissed. Sins forgiven, not arbitrarily, not just because he said so, but because he actually is a just, good God, and he hates wickedness. He hates sin. And that's and then you're freely dismissed. Like, you don't earn your salvation. Like a lot of Christians, a lot of people say you have to be a good person. That's not the Christian perspective. It says we're actually way worse than we think we are. Way worse than we think we are. Everybody. And then if we turn and trust, I mean, when I say turn, I mean like stop doing the stuff we know we shouldn't be doing, right? Like looking at women with lust or pornography or whatever it could be. That is the Christian perspective. Like, does that make sense in terms of just a short explanation?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, I understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, and so that's I'm always curious to get people's perspective. I appreciate this conversation, man. I know it went long, but I appreciate us just hanging out and talking. But here, I'll stop this. But what was your name again?